let's move the Heat-Celtics right then. There, perfect segue. The Eastern Conference Finals is set. The Celtics did win the regular season series 2-1, though there were a lot of missing pieces in those. Both teams look a little bit different than they did the last time they faced off in late March. Steve, I will start with you. What's the matchup? What is the scheme thing? What's top on the board for you that you're looking for in this series?
Defense. I'm looking forward to watching these teams play defense. This is going to be fun. Two teams that can execute different schemes, two teams that can switch, two teams that can throw lineups out there where you're not sure where the mismatch is. I'm sure both of them look at the other top guys and say, hey, we can guard them. And it kind of feels like a mirror series to me. We can defend, we can get stops, we'll go score on the other end, figure out the rest later. Which team is going to impose their style of play or be able to impose their will on the other is what interests me the most. And I want to see, how does Boston come out? You threw it to me first. That was your mistake. How do they defend with Al Horford is my question. Is he going to be switching? Is he going to be in a drop? What does that do to Miami? Which one of these teams is going to look at the switches and bog down? Is there going to be too much one-on-one? Who can create and generate quality looks consistently? I'm going to have fun with this one. But I like defense. So that's just me. They're going to be flying around, man.
I like the comment about it being a little bit of a mirror image of each other. Two teams who rely on their defense, who have a bunch of versatile defenders. To me, a little bit of this series will come down to like who can actually score consistently in the half court. And one of the things that I think Miami will try to do and should do, because target hunting against the Celtics, I don't know if that's the answer. There's not many guys you can target, in a given lineup. Like maybe the 7 minutes that Peyton Pritchard plays, you target him. But other than that, it's like there's not guys to target. So I think they've got to really figure out ways to get movement involved, and they do. That's so much of what they do. So Bam to me is like the key player in this series for Miami, not just on defense, but him as that offensive hub. They run that X action, which is basically throw it to Bam somewhere on the court and get into gaggle action. It's just random movement, random cuts, sometimes for a ball screen, sometimes for a back cut, sometimes for a pin down into a curl cut, back to a dribble handoff. They just get into so many different actions out of that. And, because I've guarded it as a team that switches all that action, when you run it right, it's really hard to guard. And then, of course, like Bam, of course, will face, you'll get into gaggle action, nothing will be open. Can he score on Horford? Like in that one-on-one scenario? Like, so he's the player for me that is the key for Miami.
It's been a little bit of a running gag between Steve and I on the podcast this season when we talk about the Heat. This is the Bam aggression series. This is Steve, sorry, but this is gonna be the Bam aggression series. JJ hit it. Like,
what's the Bam aggression? What's the?
Thank you. I've been asking.
No, I'm just curious. It was an interesting thing, but I don't know what it is. I'm very curious. I just want to say one thing about Bam and just in general about the Heat. I find them fascinating because obviously there's a hierarchy, right? There's a hierarchy. They're going to run things for Jimmy Butler. He's their primary playmaker and scorer. When Tyler Hero comes in, they're going to run things for him. But night to night, there's so much variance in who scores for that team. And Jimmy does such a good job toggling between playmaker and being aggressive and taking 20-plus shots. He like figures that out night to night. I don't think he goes into a game and says, all right, I got to shoot 22 times tonight. And so night to night, there's this huge variance. But to me, it always comes down to like, if Bam can score efficiently, they're just a much better team. If you can rely on him, and look, he had a great fucking season and he had a great Eastern Conference Finals in 2020. Of course, Al Horford was not playing then for the Boston Celtics, but he killed them in 2020. And so, like, I just believe that Bam has to be elite in this series, elite for the Heat to have a chance to win.
I'm with you. I would say just to the aggression question, I think part of my frustration with him during the regular season is that there would be these pockets in games to where Miami would use him as a handoff hub. He'd look for something, wouldn't be there, and he's still looking instead of kind of looking at the best, like, okay, go now. Or he'll get a mismatch after somebody tries to switch. I go back to the 2020 season, actually. I always have this Toronto matchup in my mind. It was the first time I saw, or the first time it really stood out to me, that team just placed a wing on Bam. OG Anunoby got the match. Was like, okay, we're going to switch anything you are doing with Duncan Robinson. Let's see what you do. And they shut Miami's water off in that game. And it's like, okay, this is the area of growth for Bam. I need to see how this progresses. In 2021, there would be the stretches. You go to the 40-point game he had against Brooklyn, where he's in attack mode consistently. And then there would still be those sessions where you get a small guy switched on him and he's looking for a guy to hand the ball off to. It's like, no, this is when you need to take over. Like, Miami needs a consistent pressure point to half court. And just looking at the hierarchy in Miami, like Jimmy Butler, I think we can both agree Jimmy Butler is their best player right now. But just in terms of the athleticism, the physical structure, like in theory, Bam is either too big for wings or he's going to be too quick and has too much ball skill for larger centers. And so projecting forward, you kind of want Bam to turn into the mismatch guy that he can be. Because I think if he does turn into that guy, then it gives Miami a little bit more of a template in the half court. And so that's where I'm looking at this series like, okay, Al Horford is a great defender. In theory, you should be able to beat him in space some. And when you're looking at the perimeter defenses, the perimeter defenders Boston has, they have Jayson Tatum. They have Jaylen Brown, who's better on ball than off ball, but they have Jaylen Brown. They have Marcus Smart. They have Grant Williams. Like, in theory, Bam should have a quickness advantage against Al Horford. We've seen what he can do to Daniel Tice. And he should have the size advantage against Grant Williams if he's playing at 5'2". So that's where I'm kind of looking at him to kind of take charge in this one. Because I think he will have easier matchups than Jimmy Butler will in this one.
There's a name you said there that's very important, Nekias. And one I'm keeping an eye on, Grant Williams. Mm-hmm. I think Grant Williams gets the Bam matchup. In theory, you keep him in front on the face-ups, turn his actions into a switch, and play out of it. But I think to your point, Bam does have to be aggressive. He does have to be the one who's able to punish like a Tatum or a Brown. I think Miami has to come in waves offensively. There has to be a wave. I've said it before, kind of like a baseball bullpen rotation. You got to deal with Jimmy. Now you got to deal with Bam. Now you got Hero or Strus going off, and now we're figuring out how to close this game. I think their guard play is going to be very important in this series. Those guys are going to have to look to take and make those shots. Strus can't be shy. Hero has to get loose. Kyle Lowry, ...
Out for game one, at least.
If he comes back, he's the X factor to me. His pull-ups versus Boston will be key. But if they don't get that ball movement, they don't have the aggression with the guard play, it's going to be tough.
So you put Horford on PJ to start?
Yes.
Yeah.
I put Grant on Bam. Let Al float a little bit. See how it works.
I don't hate that.
That takes one of my questions off the board. I was going to ask, are you starting Grant in this series? Or do you go back to Robert Williams since he appears to be healthy per Ime Udoka?
I think you got to start with Grant. You can always go back to Robert. You can always ease him back in and give him the Tice minutes to start. I think you found something. Grant's playing well, playing with confidence. Defensively, you found a rhythm. Kind of plays into what you're trying to do against Miami. So I think you salute him for what he's done. Hope he can have the same impact similarly. I mean, coming off guarding Giannis, you're probably going to feel some confidence on the defensive end of the floor. So I say you roll with that.
What a luxury to have, by the way, to be able to be like, defensively, do we start Grant Williams or do we start Robert Williams? You know, do we match up Al Horford? Do we match up Robert? Like, it's just what, honestly, it's what makes this team so special. And like I said, with a few weeks to go in the regular season, like my concern with the team was like, do they have knockdown shooting? That was my concern with the Celtics. And I'm like, in the last 2 weeks of the season, Pritchard shoots the shit out of the ball. Grant Williams, of course, He was good pretty much the whole season. He's been amazing in playoffs. That's not a question mark for me anymore. My question mark for Boston really is always going to be, what version of their offense are we getting? Are we getting your turn, my turn, contested twos? I'm going to go into hero mode and God mode. I don't think they're as good when they do that. And, game 2 of the Milwaukee series was a great example of that. So many good to great moments in that series, or in that game. So many times, a guy gets a kick out pass, has a shot, either swings it or redrives, kicks it to another guy. And the Heat, for years, and I put Toronto's defense, especially when they won it, and for years with Kyle Lowry as well. The Heat are so good at multiple efforts, and you're going to have to make them make multiple efforts if you're going to be successful in the half court.
No, I think their paint touches are going to be key. You got to loosen them up. You got to make those plays, as you stated. I'm interested to see, which offense do you trust more to hit the right button between these two?
Me?
Yeah. Yeah. You got to ask the shooter. You got to ask the
It's funny because I can simultaneously trust both defenses while not trusting both offenses against those defenses. You know what I mean? I don't know, man. I don't know. It's hard. It's weird because it's hard to say. I think for a casual fan, and really for anybody that loves hoops and watches hoops, we're seeing Tatum play at this level. We're seeing Jimmy Butler play at this level. We're like, oh no, they're gonna be fine in the half court. But then they go against each other. Those those offenses go against the opposing defense, and these two defenses are just built. They're built for the playoffs. They're built for the playoffs. The personnel, the scheming, the effort. Yeah, I mean, over under average, total points per game in this series was 180, 185 max. What are we looking at here? Because there's going to be some 92-77 games in this series. There'll probably be more of those, I would guess, than 120-108 games in this series.
I'm with you. I guess on the Boston offense front, I can speak. There we go. I feel like Boston may have a slightly easier time creating some shots just because of how Miami wants to load up on stars. I go back to the Sixers series, pre-Embiid, but we're switching hard in actions, and then we're just pinching in at the elbows. We're pinching in the paint. You may have a mismatch, but you can't really attack it because of how we're crowding the paint. I think Miami's going to try to do a little bit of that depending on who Boston has on the floor, and that's where I'm kind of intrigued by the Robert Williams thing, because if you do put him back in the lineup, you want to go big, try to really pinch the paint against Miami. On the other end, they're going to let Al Horford shoot. They're going to tip their hat, hey, good job in the Milwaukee series. Do it again. And they're also going to try to help off of Robert Williams if he can, if he's not in the dunker spot. And I think they're going to restrict space for Jayson Tatum, for Jaylen Brown. That could be a little iffy. On the flip side, they do stay spread out. It'll be a little bit similar. I think they'll still try to make Grant beat them. But that should open some things up. They're able to get the ball moving. So to your point, Boston's going to have to find that flow in the half court. They're going to have to keep the ball moving because Miami's able to bring them down into the mud. That gives them a chance. Miami's going to want to win in transition anyway. That's where their offense is at their best, where they're able to force misses, force turnovers.
Yeah.
It's all about process and flow, but Boston always has those weird moments where they seem to enjoy switching, go one-on-one, and it doesn't matter. So who knows? There's a curveball, though, folks. The zone from Miami.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to bring this up, too. I like this.
Anytime I feel like Boston is going to come close to a rhythm, the zone's coming out. And that, to me, feels like the one Boston's going to have to conquer to win this series. Because that's going to take them out of rhythm.
By the way, they busted out the 2-2-1 a bunch against the Sixers, which I loved. Bringing it back to high school, 2-2-1 zone. I love how Spo uses the zone too. He's so smart with it. I think it was Game 4, Philly in Philly, and it was a clear 2-for-1 opportunity on a make, not a free throw, make, 39 seconds, whatever. And Spo just immediately calls for the zone. They switch right into the zone. Philly doesn't get the 2-for-1. I mean, you could bet your fucking every dollar you have that on ATOs they're gonna run fucking zone. Like they just he knows when to use it, and I think he's great. To your point, I think he's great in terms of feeling out that flow and be like, oh, here's an opportunity with this lineup, maybe that we have on the court or they have on the court. Maybe it's when Robert Williams is in the game. I don't know, but like let's throw the zone here. Let's throw the zone here. And they use it well. I mean, I thought Philly actually should have used it more in that series, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, that was gonna be my next.
That's a whole other thing. I mean, they actually had a lot of success running zone, and I don't know why they didn't run it more, but whatever. What do I know? What do I know?
That was going to be my next point, because Philly did have success against Miami in the zone. My question was going to be like, who do you trust more against the zone with these offenses? It's kind of bleeding into the half court process question. Because
yeah,
it's been.
I think in terms of shooting, you probably like in terms of like guys that can get that quick trigger off. Like I'd probably say Miami, but again, they at times struggled in that Sixer series against the zone. But I definitely trust Boston shooters. But I trust, I trust Strus. I trust Gabe Vincent. Like I know those guys, don't have the resume of other guys even on the Heat roster, but they're great shooters. They're confident. They have nuts. They have stones. Like I trust them. I just, I will go back to Kyle Lowry for a second. Like I don't even like, I know you brought him up as an X factor. Like I'm almost looking at them playing this series without him, even if he comes back, just because I know the nature of a nagging hamstring injury, because I've had enough in my career. And I had one in my first year with the Pelicans that lasted for about 3 months. And then I finally popped it and had a grade 2 and was out 3 weeks. And then a week later, the world shut down. So I was right for the bubble. But I mean, those things, they're in real time, in season, they're really hard to manage. And so even if he does come back, I don't know that we're getting any version of Toronto Kyle Lowry. I just don't think that's realistic.
And I think for Miami, like this is a dull thing to say, but you don't rush him back because you don't want re-injury. But also, you don't want to feed Boston a matchup either. Not that Kyle Lowry is a bad defender, but he is 6 foot on a good day. He doesn't move as well laterally as he used to. You don't want hampered Kyle Lowry when you have Gabe Vincent, who is a feisty defender at the point of attack. Victor Oladipo, who is now basically forced his way into the rotation based on what he's done defensively and some of the downhill juice he's giving you on the other end. So I think Miami should play it conservatively with Kyle at this point.
Man, you know what? We didn't even talk about Vic. Vic might be the X factor. I know I said Bam, but I think Bam is the key. I think Bam is the guy that's just got to have a big series. But Vic's the guy that can win you a couple games in the series. Like he's a guy that can swing. Just like Grant Williams probably has won the Celtics 2 games in the series. Vic could be a guy that could win them a game in the series.
I can see it. He didn't get to play against Boston during the regular season series, so I'm curious to see how Boston defends him. But to your point, like he closed out the Hawks with 20-plus points in that game 5 with Jimmy Butler out.
Yeah.
So he's already shown that he can have a moment.
Yeah.
While we're on the stars, JJ, how would you defend Jayson Tatum in pick and roll in this series?
Good question. Yeah. Look, I like Bam as the guy on the ball. I like size on size. Um, you know, Jayson at times can get too deep against drop coverage. So I think there's some credence to the fact that you can probably get away at times with playing drop coverage against him. And the fact that they do have Jimmy Butler and PJ that will guard him. So in terms of that, those pull-up jumpers, I mean, we saw it early in that Milwaukee series, the way Wes Matthews and Drew Holiday were getting those rear view contests. Like that matters. So I think you can get away with it, but I just like you get to the third quarter, fourth quarter, whatever, they're switching. Like Bam's going to guard them in those pick and rolls, and they should. I was impressed as that series went on with Jayson's decision making. I thought he had some great. Game 7, he was phenomenal. His decision making in Game 7 was phenomenal. But there were other times, and obviously he had the big scoring night in Game 6. But there were other times throughout that series where I just thought he just was very patient, very calm. He just made the right play, the simple play. Didn't force anything, and he's going to have. Even he's going to have to do that. He's going to have to do it against the Heat.